He watched his 8-year-old daughter skip out the door to grab groceries and never saw her again. It was supposed to be a normal day. Bright skies, quiet street, a quick errand, nothing more. Just one block away, a small neighborhood store where everyone knew everyone, the kind of place you'd think was safe for a child. But by nightfall, everything Grayson Coleman thought he knew about the world shattered. That was 10 years ago. 10 years since the last time he saw her round cheeks and playful smile. 10 years since her laughter echoed through the walls of his tiny home. 10 years of silence, and a question that haunted him every single day. What if I never sent her out that afternoon? Before we dive deeper into this emotional story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this kind of story speaks to you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Grayson had only just returned from a long shift. He was exhausted, mentally drained, the kind of tired that sinks deep into your bones. But they needed bread, and Haley, his bright, beautiful daughter, had insisted. "Daddy, I know the way. It's just right there." He hesitated, but eventually he let her go. That was the last time he saw her. The hours ticked by. He glanced at the clock once, then again, then again. The sun began to set. No sign of her. He walked down to the store himself, hoping maybe she'd gotten distracted. Maybe she was chatting with Mrs. Walton, the elderly cashier who always gave her gum. But the store had never seen her that day. She never made it there. He called the police. He ran to every neighbor's door. He screamed her name down the street, into alleyways, behind fences, through tears. But Haley was gone, and the world went dark. Fast forward to 10 years later. Grayson sat in the same living room he once decorated with unicorn balloons and pink birthday streamers. But now it was silent, cold, still. The curtains never moved. The air felt heavier. He held a framed picture in his hand. Haley, missing her 2 front teeth, beaming in a school uniform. His thumb gently traced the glass as his voice cracked through the quiet. "You would have been 18 today." Her room remained untouched, just the way she left it. The sheets neatly folded. A rainbow-colored teddy bear perched at the edge of the bed. A paper crown from her last birthday still taped to the mirror. Grayson stood at the doorway every morning. Sometimes he stepped inside. Sometimes he just stared. Guilt was a permanent companion. It gnawed at him in the still of night, in the creak of floorboards, in the sound of passing footsteps outside the window. If I hadn't let her go alone, his mind replayed that afternoon endlessly. The soft patter of her shoes, the way she turned at the corner and waved one last time. He had smiled, told her to hurry, but she never came back, and that smile haunted him. He lived alone, always had, since the day Haley was born. His wife died in the hospital, internal bleeding, complications. One life began as another ended. So Haley became his world, his reason, his light, and in one moment it was all taken away. No family, no siblings, just him and a growing mountain of what-ifs. In the years that followed Haley's disappearance, Grayson slowly became a shadow of the man he once was. He didn't stop looking, not for a single day. While other people moved on with their lives, had new beginnings, laughed at new jokes, Grayson remained frozen in that moment 10 years ago. Every corner of the city held a memory. Every street sign, every rusted lamppost, every crack in the pavement near the corner store, they all whispered her name. He used to be a reliable worker, steady, dependable, but he couldn't hold down a job anymore. He'd disappear mid-shift to chase down a rumor. Miss deadlines because he was following leads posted on an anonymous forum. He'd spend hours printing out missing child posters, even years after the police had stopped. Once, he drove 4 states away because someone thought they saw a girl who looked like Haley working at a gas station. When he got there, he realized the girl was 3 years too young, and not even close. But he still apologized to her, and cried the whole drive back home. Friends stopped calling, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how to handle his pain. They didn't know what to say anymore. They couldn't stand the silence in his home, or the way Grayson's eyes always wandered, as if searching for a ghost no one else could see. Except for one person, Charles. Charles was his best friend. His only friend. They had been through everything together. School, weddings, funerals. When Grayson lost his wife, Charles helped him pick up the pieces. And when Haley was born, Charles was there, beaming like an uncle. Even after Haley vanished, Charles stuck around. He'd stop by now and then with takeout, sit with Grayson in the quiet, trying not to say the wrong thing. "Man, you've got to try to live again," Charles would say softly, placing a beer on the coffee table. "You're still here. You're still breathing. That counts for something." But Grayson would only stare at the floor. How do you live when the best part of your life is gone? There were days when Charles didn't say anything at all. He'd just sit across from Grayson while the news hummed in the background, the room filled with silence and grief so loud it was deafening. Still, something about Charles never quite sat right. Grayson could never put his finger on it. Charles was always supportive, always present, but distant, always on edge whenever Haley's name came up in conversation. At first, Grayson thought maybe it was just awkwardness. Most people didn't know how to talk about a missing child without fumbling over their words. But it wasn't just that. It was in the way Charles would shift in his seat when Grayson mentioned a new lead. It was the way he suddenly changed the subject whenever Haley's face appeared on the news. And most of all, it was the fact that in all the years they'd known each other, Grayson had barely set foot inside Charles's home. They'd always met at Grayson's place, or at a bar, or at the park, but never at Charles's apartment. And whenever Grayson casually suggested visiting, Charles would offer a polite smile and an excuse. "Ah, man, it's a mess right now. The place is being fumigated. I've got family over, maybe another time." Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it really was just bad timing. But after 10 years of friendship, it didn't feel like nothing anymore. Still, Grayson didn't question it. He had enough demons of his own to wrestle. And if Charles was offering comfort in his own flawed way, that was more than most people had given him. But the seed of suspicion, no matter how small, had already been planted, and soon it would grow into something darker than he could ever imagine. It was late one evening, the kind where the silence in the house felt louder than usual. Grayson stood in his kitchen, staring into a half-empty cup of cold coffee. The air was still, too still. He leaned against the counter, eyes drawn to a faded drawing on the fridge. Haley's scribbled attempt at a rainbow, crooked and bright. It had been over a decade, and still, he hadn't stopped checking the mailbox every morning like he was waiting for a miracle. Still hadn't stopped scanning crowds for a glimpse of her. A mole on the cheek, a familiar swing of hair, a laugh that echoed like hers used to. But that night, his thoughts shifted slightly. Not toward Haley, but toward Charles. Not in an accusatory way, not yet, but in quiet curiosity. 10 years of friendship, countless nights spent grieving together. Dozens of takeout meals eaten in silence. But not once had Grayson been inside Charles's house. He'd seen it from the outside, of course. Charles lived in a gated community just a few neighborhoods over. Modern design, clean lawns, nothing unusual. But every time Grayson hinted at coming over, Charles skillfully sidestepped the suggestion. "Why haven't I ever been to his house?" Grayson muttered aloud, surprised at his own question. He shook his head. Maybe Charles was just a private person. Maybe his home was his escape, his quiet. Everyone has a line they don't cross, right? Still, it nagged at him. Why would a best friend of over 10 years keep such a distance from one place, the very place that should have been the safest for a conversation, a shared drink, a memory? But life had already taught Grayson not to press too hard. People left, people lied, and sometimes the answers you were looking for were worse than the silence. So he let the thought pass, or tried to. Then 2 days later, something unusual happened. Charles called. His voice was upbeat, casual, almost too casual. "Hey, big guy, there's a game on Saturday night. Thought you might want to come over, crack open a few beers, yell at the TV like we used to." Grayson blinked, confused. "Your place?" he asked, uncertain. "Yeah, why not? Feels like it's been forever." It was the first time Charles had ever invited him over. Grayson hesitated. 100 thoughts raced through his mind, none of them complete. Something about it felt sudden, off rhythm. But he didn't want to sound paranoid. This was Charles, his best friend, the one person who stuck around when everyone else faded away. "Yeah, sure," Grayson replied slowly. "Sounds good." But even as he said the words, a quiet tension settled in his chest. Something about this night, this invitation, this sudden opening, felt like a door was being unlocked. He just didn't know what he was walking into yet. Saturday night came faster than expected. Grayson stood outside Charles's home, staring at the front door like it was a gate to another world. It felt strange, foreign, as if walking through that door would change something, even though he didn't know what yet. He took a breath, smoothed down the wrinkles in his shirt, and knocked. The door opened almost instantly, and there was Charles, all smiles, arms wide. "Come on in, brother." The inside of the house was neat, almost too neat. Clean surfaces, neutral tones, a faint smell of lemon-scented polish in the air. There were no personal touches, no family photos, no signs of anyone else living there, just polished furniture and perfectly placed decor. Grayson stepped in slowly, his eyes drifting across the space. "You live here alone?" he asked casually. "Yeah, just me. Quiet life, you know." They moved to the living room where the game was already playing on the TV. Charles handed him a cold beer, then plopped down on the couch with exaggerated excitement. For a while they laughed, shouted at the players. Grayson even forgot, for a fleeting moment, about the ache in his chest, the silence back home, the empty room down the hall that hadn't changed in 10 years. It felt almost normal. Until it didn't. Charles got up to use the restroom. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, once, then again. The screen lit up, casting a small glow across the glass. Grayson didn't mean to look. It was just a reflex, a flick of the eyes. But the name on the message stole the breath from his lungs. "How about Haley Coleman, boss?" Grayson froze. The beer bottle in his hand trembled slightly as he read the words again. No, it couldn't be. There must be hundreds of girls named Haley. And Coleman? That's a common enough last name, right? But in his gut, he knew. His vision blurred. His fingers tightened around the bottle, his jaw clenched, his heartbeat drummed in his ears like thunder. He stared at the phone, willing the screen to fade, praying it was some kind of twisted coincidence. Then he heard footsteps. Charles was coming back. Grayson blinked hard, sat back quickly, and forced his face into a calm mask. The phone buzzed again, just as Charles re-entered the room. He glanced at it, and for a split second, just a fraction of a moment, his expression changed. His eyes flickered, his shoulders tensed, and then he tried to play it off. "Hey, I think I've got work early in the morning," Charles said, his voice forced and flat. "We should probably call it a night." Grayson looked at him closely. The mask Charles wore was cracking, just barely. But it was enough. The man who had sat beside him for years, the only person he trusted, was hiding something, and Grayson knew this night wasn't just a friendly catch-up. This was the beginning of something deeper, darker. He stood up slowly, setting the beer down on the table. "Yeah, sure, I should get going anyway." But he wasn't going home. Not yet. Grayson stepped outside, the cool night air hitting his face like a slap. He walked to his car, his fingers fumbling for the keys. But he didn't start the engine. Instead, he sat there, hands gripping the wheel, staring into the dark street ahead of him. His mind raced. Haley Coleman. That name hadn't been spoken by anyone else in years. Not out loud, not in text, not even in whispers. The police had closed the case. Everyone had moved on, except him. And now, Charles's phone had just casually dropped her name like it was part of a conversation. Why now? And more importantly, who was he talking to? Grayson's eyes moved back toward the house. The curtains were drawn, lights still on. Charles was probably pacing the living room, texting back, hiding whatever it was he didn't want Grayson to see. And suddenly, a quiet rage bubbled up inside him. "Wait, what do you do again, Charles?" he had asked casually, back inside. Charles had blinked, a little caught off guard. "I've told you before, man. I import and export. Nothing exciting." But Grayson couldn't remember the last time he saw Charles at a job. He had no office, no coworkers, no calls that sounded like business. It didn't add up, and now Grayson had seen something he wasn't meant to see. He turned off the interior lights in his car and pulled it a little farther down the street, just out of view, behind a cluster of trees. Then he waited and waited, because tonight, something was happening, and Grayson wasn't going to leave until he found out exactly what. The street was quiet, too quiet. Grayson sat low in his seat watching Charles's house from the shadow of a tree-lined curb. The minutes felt like hours. Every passing second dripped with a tension that thickened the air. And then, movement. The front door opened. Charles stepped out, locking it behind him. No hesitation, no looking around, just straight to his car, keys in hand, like a man with a plan already in motion. Grayson ducked slightly, heart pounding. He waited until Charles pulled away, then started his engine. He kept his headlights off for the first block, following at a careful distance. Street after street blurred past, out of the neighborhood, past the convenience stores and apartment buildings, into the industrial zone, quiet, forgotten, the kind of place that didn't have working streetlights anymore. Finally, Charles turned down a cracked road that led to a long abandoned warehouse. Rusted signage hung loose from the corners, faded graffiti, empty windows staring like dark eyes into the night. Grayson parked 2 blocks back behind a row of dumpsters. He killed the engine, stepped out quietly, and made his way closer on foot, hugging the walls, his breath tight in his throat. Charles's car was parked out front, and he wasn't alone. Another vehicle, a large truck, was already pulling in. Its engine growled low as it rolled to a stop beside the warehouse. The back door of the truck creaked open, and what Grayson saw next turned his blood to ice. Children, not just one, a group of them. Boys, girls, teenagers, blindfolded, quiet, shuffling forward with hesitant steps. They were led out in pairs, their wrists bound lightly, some clinging to each other in fear. They didn't speak, they didn't cry, but their silence screamed louder than any sound Grayson had ever heard. From the shadows, Grayson watched as Charles stepped forward, speaking to the truck driver, low, firm, like he was giving orders. Then he gave a signal, a small hand gesture, familiar, practiced. The warehouse door opened, and the children were led inside. Grayson's entire body went rigid. His hands trembled, his chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. "What is this?" he whispered. "What are you into, Charles?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His hands were too shaky. He tried filming, but the footage was grainy, too dark to make out details. He turned on voice recording. Anything. He needed proof, evidence, but his instincts were already screaming at him. This wasn't smuggling. This wasn't business. This was something far more sinister. And then, a horrifying question cut through his mind. Is she in there? Is Haley among them? He hadn't seen her in 10 years, but he would recognize her anywhere. The shape of her face, her stance, her small birthmark on the side of her neck. He scanned every face, every figure, straining to see past the dark, hoping, dreading. None of them looked like her. But that didn't bring comfort. Not yet. Because if Charles was part of this, if he had been doing this for years, then where had Haley gone? Grayson's breath caught in his throat as he opened his call list. He scrolled down, trembling, and tapped on a name he hadn't called in a long time. Detective Ethan, the man who had investigated Haley's disappearance all those years ago. The one who never gave up until the case turned cold. The phone rang, once, twice, then voicemail. Grayson nearly cursed under his breath. He couldn't go to the police station. By the time he got there, the children would be gone. Evidence would be gone. Charles would vanish. He had to wait. He had to stay hidden, to keep watching. Because for the first time in 10 long, aching years, Grayson had found something real. Not a rumor, not a coincidence. This, whatever this was connected. And deep inside, beneath the fear, the rage, the helplessness, he felt it. A pulse of hope. Because if Charles was part of something this evil, then maybe Haley had never been lost. Maybe she had been taken. And if she was taken, then she might still be alive. The night was thick with silence. Grayson crouched behind a rusted dumpster, his hands ice cold, his heart thundering in his chest. He checked his phone again. No reply, no missed calls. He stared back at the warehouse. The door had shut, the truck had pulled away, and Charles had disappeared inside. The recording on his phone kept running, but he knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. He needed someone who could act. And then, finally, his phone buzzed. Incoming call, Detective Ethan. Grayson snatched it up with trembling fingers, pressing it to his ear. "Ethan, it's me. I think I know how to find my daughter." There was a pause on the other end, a long, weighted silence. Then, "Grayson, what are you talking about?" "Charles, my friend Charles. I followed him. He led me to a warehouse. There are children, blindfolded. They brought them in a truck. Ethan, I saw it with my own eyes. You need to get here, now." He gave the location, every detail. His voice cracked. He didn't care. "Please, Ethan, you know me. You were there when she disappeared. I need you to believe me. Please, just come." Another pause. Then Ethan's voice dropped low, steady, controlled. "Don't move. Stay hidden. I'm sending units now. I'll be there myself." Grayson hung up and crouched lower, chest heaving. The minutes crawled. Every second felt like a lifetime. The night seemed to hold its breath. Then in the distance, flashes of light. No sirens, just silent, gliding vehicles. Black vans, headlights off, dark uniforms moving in like shadows. SWAT had arrived. They approached the warehouse like ghosts, one by one, spreading out, surrounding the perimeter. Grayson watched as a silent hand signal was given. Then, boom. A battering ram shattered the back door. The air exploded with movement. Shouts, screams, boots against concrete, flashlights slicing through the dark. Hands in the air! Get on the ground! Clear the corridor! Secure the kids! Grayson rose slightly from his hiding spot, just enough to see through a cracked window. Children poured out, blinking against the light, some crying, some frozen in fear. Officers wrapped them in blankets, guided them gently, reassured them. Inside, chaos. Several men pinned to the floor, zip ties around their wrists. Charles stood among them, arms raised, his face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just stood there, exposed under the harsh beam of a flashlight, the weight of his secrets crushing him where he stood. Grayson's breath caught. He didn't cheer, didn't smile, because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. But for the first time in 10 years, something had cracked open. And through that crack, the first flicker of truth began to pour in. The warehouse was surrounded now. Police lights cast flickering shadows on the cracked pavement, painting the night in flashes of red and blue. Officers moved briskly, guiding children into waiting vans where counselors and medics stood by. Grayson stood back, his body stiff, his eyes searching, desperately scanning each face as they emerged from the darkness. Dozens of them, tired, pale, some clinging to one another, some barely able to walk, some too numb to cry. And then one girl. She had Haley's build, the same dark curls. She walked with a slight limp, just like Haley did after she tripped and scraped her knee riding her bike at age 6. Grayson's heart raced. He stepped forward, breath caught in his throat. The world narrowed around her. Nothing else existed. But when she turned, her face came into view, and it wasn't Haley. Grayson stopped in his tracks. He felt something tear in his chest, a sudden collapse, a breath he didn't realize he had been holding for 10 long years, exhaled into nothing. It wasn't her. Haley was not here. He stood frozen, watching as more children were brought out. He scanned each one, again, but she was nowhere among them. She wasn't there. And yet, the man responsible, someone he called his brother, was. Charles sat handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser, staring blankly at the floor. No tears, no shame, just silence. Grayson stepped forward. "I need to talk to him," he said firmly. Ethan turned toward him, hesitant. "Grayson, this might not be the right time." "I need to talk to him," he repeated, his voice sharper now, trembling with rage barely held beneath the surface. The door to the cruiser opened. Grayson stepped inside, the cold steel air hitting him like a wall. He looked at the man he once called a friend. "I trusted you," Grayson said, voice low, quaking. "I let you into my home. I shared my grief with you. I cried in front of you. You held her baby photos in your hands. And all this time, you were the one, weren't you?" Charles slowly lifted his head. His eyes met Grayson's. And then, without flinching, he said quietly, "You don't want to know." Grayson's fists clenched. "Where is my daughter?" No response. Grayson lunged forward slightly, his voice breaking. "Where's my daughter, Charles?" Ethan stepped in just in time, placing a firm hand on Grayson's shoulder, pulling him back. "Let me handle this," he said gently. The door shut. Grayson stepped away, his body trembling, breath ragged. Inside the precinct hours later, Charles sat alone in an interrogation room. The camera above recorded every breath, every blink. Detective Ethan walked in. No anger, just cold precision. The first minutes were quiet. Charles didn't speak. Then Ethan laid a folder on the table. Photos, names, testimonies, frozen images of the children they had just rescued. And then a name, Haley Coleman. Charles looked at it for a long time, and then he spoke. What came out next shattered Grayson's world all over again. He confessed that he had been working with a trafficking syndicate for years, a network that stretched across cities, invisible, faceless, and devastatingly organized. He moved children, handled logistics, covered tracks. He was trusted, clean, unassuming, the kind of man no one ever suspected. And Haley? She was his first. You were tired that day, Charles said coldly in his statement. You didn't want to walk her. She asked you twice. You told her to go ahead without you. That's all I needed. He had been watching, waiting for a moment of weakness. She was wearing that yellow sweater, holding a shopping list. I pulled up just as she passed the alley. Grayson had no idea. She screamed for you, Charles continued. She screamed until they gagged her. Ethan slammed the folder shut, his jaw tight. Outside the room, Grayson stood motionless, his face pale, tears falling silently. He had carried the guilt for 10 years, but nothing could prepare him for this. His daughter hadn't disappeared by chance. She had been taken by the one person he trusted most. The warehouse was cleared. Children were safe, arrests were made. The nightmare was no longer just a suspicion, it was real. But Haley wasn't there. Grayson stood alone in the corner of the precinct, staring at a white wall as if it could give him answers. His shoulders hung low, hands limp at his sides. His face looked older, like he had aged another decade in just one night. He hadn't cried, not yet. There were no tears left, just an ache, a dull, hollow ache where hope used to be. Detective Ethan approached quietly, holding a file. "We found something," he said. Grayson turned slowly. Inside the file were records, dozens of pages recovered from the warehouse, coded documents, shipment manifests, photos, handwritten notes. The syndicate hadn't just trafficked children, they had documented them. And on page 11, her name, Haley Coleman. Grayson's heart skipped. It wasn't just a name, it was attached to a photo, grainy, low quality, but unmistakably her. She looked older, thinner, but those eyes, they were still Haley's. The file listed a transfer, Florida, 7 years ago, no return. That meant she was alive at least until then. Grayson swallowed hard, his knees nearly giving out. He clutched the folder to his chest like it was a lifeline. 10 years of questions, 10 years of false leads and dead ends, and now, finally, a trail. The investigation reopened, a new task force was formed, the FBI stepped in. Florida law enforcement began combing through missing records, shelter logs, arrest databases. They searched hospitals, schools, anything. But Grayson couldn't wait. He packed a small bag, folded the photo and placed it inside his wallet. Then he hit the road. He didn't care how long it took. He didn't care where it led. Florida was just the beginning. He would search every street, knock on every door, speak to anyone who had a memory, a name, a clue. Because now, he wasn't searching in the dark. Now, he had a compass, and that compass was hope. For 10 years, he carried a weight no father should bear. For 10 years, he blamed himself. For 10 years, he trusted the wrong person and never saw the knife behind the smile. Now, he knows the truth. And though the pain has not left, he is no longer standing still. Because sometimes the most powerful thing isn't knowing where to go, it's knowing that there's still somewhere to look. Some wounds may never heal, but the truth, once uncovered, becomes a compass. And for Grayson Coleman, the search has only just begun.